then how would you know that you're generous, except, that you tell yourself you are? So what I have done is create an experience in life called daily living, in which you have an opportunity to demonstrate who you really are. So if you're walking down the street and you see a homeless person sitting on the sidewalk leaning up against a building with a little basket in front of him and a little cardboard sign that says anything helps, maybe you want to demonstrate your generosity. And don't drop in a quarter. Don't put a 50-cent piece in the basket. Dare you, double dare you. Take out a $20 bill. Drop it in the basket.
You had this conversation with God at the age of 51. Was there a reason you didn't have it before then? Are there certain requirements or, is there certain things that you think people need to have happened to them for them to be ready to communicate with God? Or can anybody have this conversation right now?
My answer to your first question, why didn't I have my conversation before the age of 51 is, and the law of opposites says in the absence of what you are not, what you are is not. That is, it is not experienceable. Therefore, if you want to elevate the conversation a bit, if you want to see yourself as the light, if you actually say in your heart, I am the light, you will find yourself in many moments of your life in the space of what you would call the darkness. Because in the absence of the darkness, you cannot experience yourself as being the light. Therefore, raise not your fist to heaven and curse the darkness not, but be a light unto the darkness, that you might know who you really are.
Our mission here at the Heart Coherence Collaborative is to get people in touch with the healing power of the heart.
And we really need your help. Right now, only 1% of viewers subscribe. We are aiming to take that number to 6%.
The reason why we want to do that is the more people that subscribe, the more people in the world can learn the magical practice of heart coherence.
So please help us out. If you ever listened, if you love this message, please just take a moment to subscribe.
Thank you so much.
We love you.
Welcome, everybody, to the Heart Coherence Collaborative. We're so honored. We have our good friend Neale Donald Walsch back with us today. We've been lucky enough to have Neale on with us 2 times before, and the wisdom we've received has been mind-blowing. I've shared a lot of Neale's work with a couple of my friends who have been studying Neale's work almost regularly every day, and they've been begging me to have you back on. So we decided to invite our friends here, to come be here with you because our community loves you so much. So thank you, Neale, for being back with us.
That's a really kind thing to say. Thank you for inviting me. It's always a joy to be in any position where I can share the message that I was given to share in conversations with God. So thank you for the opportunity to do so. How may I be of service to you today?
Yes. So, and I just want to say, you almost need no introduction. Many people started to know you from the Conversations with God books, and now you've got a few newer ones that we've read, which is the God Solution and the God Dilemma. But when I was thinking about introducing you, it always comes up to just say, like, you meant a lot to us before we booked the interview. But our first interview, our dog was really sick and he was having a bad day, and we came on with you. And I mean, you're obviously, like, to us, you were like the biggest get that we'd ever gotten. It was like, oh my gosh, we're having Neale Donald Walsch. And he was having a bad day, the dog, and you so kindly rescheduled with us like it was nothing. So I think beyond just being the author of these books, you are just really a kind person.
Holly, I don't know. Wait a minute. Let me see if I have this. Did you send them the check? Oh, the check's in the mail. Okay. Okay. Thank you for those kind comments. Your check is in the mail.
Okay, we'll be looking
Yeah.
out for that.
Yeah, I would love to just start off by asking you a question of the importance of the first question you asked us, which is how may I serve? I've heard you say that 2 or 3 times already in this conversation, so I would just love to hear the importance of that for you.
Golly, Kyle, for me, life is about serving 2 things. Number 1, the agenda of my soul. And number 2, all those whose lives I touch. I live in a strange kind of a world in which I do not think that I touch other people's lives without a reason. I think that my interactions with every other human being, whether it's something, really personal like this, or just the lady at the supermarket in the checkout line who's handling the cash register. I think that my interaction with every human being whose life I come in touch with is purposeful. That is, it gives me an opportunity to serve my own agenda, which is to announce and declare, to express and fulfill, to become and to experience who I really am. And I think that's the agenda. I've been told that's the agenda of all of us, that every sentient being in the cosmos, not just on Earth, but throughout the universe, that all sentient beings share the same broad agenda, which is to evolve into the grandest version of who they are through the demonstration and the expression thereof. So you know what? Not just on this program, but wherever I go, if I am in fact in the supermarket and I'm interacting with other people, I may say to them, if I have a direct personal interaction, how may I serve you? And that question often meets with raised eyebrows. What do you mean? And then I say, well, if there's anything that I could do for you or any way I could assist you in the moments just ahead in your life. One lady actually said to me in the checkout line, she jokingly said, well, you could pay for all my groceries. And you know what? Just to join in the fun, I actually did. I said to the cashier, charge her groceries to my bill. And she looked at me, she said, oh, no, I was just kidding. I don't really want you to do that. I said, oh, okay, then don't charge her. Then don't charge her. Don't charge her bill to my bill. So, but I wanted to just, I think we need to just be aware that there's a larger purpose for our connections with each other on this planet. And if people who are married, if people who are coupled in a partnership, if people who are together for business purposes, if people who are simply living with their relatives, if they were simply to think every moment of every day, how may I serve you? I think the day would change, the moment would change. I think an entire life would change. So to answer your question, to take 2.5 minutes to answer your 12-second question, to me, how may I serve you is really my way of saying, help me to serve myself. Help me to serve my agenda by telling me how I can serve you. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Because I really see that I am serving my agenda if and when I'm able to serve you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned in your answer something about, being who we are. And I love that you say there's a question that most people don't even really ask themselves, which is, who am I? What is my identity? And I'd love to hear you talk about that, about who are we? Because we often feel like a body or a brain, or, we feel like our life here is what we are. What is the answer to that question? Who are
Well,
we?
I don't know if I have the answer, capital T, capital A, but I know I have my answer. And you know what's interesting, Leah? I've been asking myself that question since I was around 7 or 8 years old, actually. Honestly, I can remember tossing back and forth in bed, in the early morning hours. I would wake up at, 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, way before the rest of the family, And I'd be lying there in my bed. I'm 7.5, 8 years old, thinking, who am I? Why am I here? And I'm trying to get a handle on what's going on, this experience that I'm having called life. And even at the age of 8, I had those kinds of questions, but I never really had an answer until I had my conversation with God at the age of, I guess I was 51, 52 years old. And I finally asked God, what's going on? I don't understand. What is this process called life about? And God said, sweetheart, you're a part of me. Every sentient being in the cosmos is a part of me. And so you are, to use human definitions, an individuation of divinity. That's who you are. You're not your body, of course. You're not your mind. Those are just tools, pieces of equipment that you've given yourself with which to serve the agenda of your soul. And the agenda of your soul is to experience, not just to know conceptually, but to experience directly your true identity. And then I said, could you explain that to me? Look, can you give me an example? God said, I'll give you a very good example. Do you think you're a generous human being? I said, I like to think so. I think I'm generous with my time, with my talents, even with my money. I think I'm generous as a human being. God said, but how would you know that if you never demonstrated it? If it was just a concept you have in your mind, Neale the generous. But if you never ever had an opportunity to to demonstrate generosity, then how would you know that you're generous, except, that you tell yourself you are? So what I have done is create an experience in life called daily living, in which you have an opportunity to demonstrate who you really are. So if you're walking down the street and you see a homeless person sitting on the sidewalk leaning up against a building with a little basket in front of him and a little cardboard sign that says anything helps, maybe you want to demonstrate your generosity. Don't drop in a quarter. Don't put a 50-cent piece in the basket. Dare you, double dare you. Take out a $20 bill and drop it in the basket, which is more than he will collect from one person for the next 3 days. And then you can walk away and see how you feel. Oh, I am Kyle the generous. I just gave $20 to that homeless person. Not because he needs it, but because I choose to demonstrate and experience fully who I really am in every area of my life. Not just my financial generosity, but that I'm a giving, caring, compassionate, loving human being. And if you don't believe me, or if I don't even believe myself, watch me in the next half hour. And then you watch all the things you do and say for the next 30 minutes and see if what you are doing and saying are demonstrations of the grandest thought you ever had about who you really are. I want to end my long answer by saying, dare we do that? Dare we even have such a high thought about who we are? And if we do have a grand notion about who we really are at the depth of our being, do we have the courage to demonstrate it, no matter what anyone else might think that we're trying to accomplish? Some people might say, oh, he's just trying to impress people. He's just trying to impress everybody. No, but I have to say to myself, it may look that way to you, but there's only one human being I'm trying to impress. I want to impress upon myself who I really am in my highest thought about who I ever was. And it's okay for me to have a high thought about myself. You know what? When I was a young child, a boy, 9, 10, 12 years old, my father taught me not to think the highest thought about myself. They would say, don't brag, don't boast, don't think you're so special. Oh, you think you're so special, do you? And I wanted to say when I was 9, well, yeah, actually, I do think I'm special. You mean I'm not? And my dad would say, well, I'm not saying you're not special, son, but don't go around trying to prove it to everybody. And my 9-year-old mind would go, I wonder why not? Why wouldn't I want to demonstrate, the way my dad put it, prove it, but why wouldn't I want to demonstrate the highest thought I ever had about myself? So I decided when I was a little older and got out of the house and was on my own, by gosh and by golly, I'm going to demonstrate to the best of my ability the grandest notion I ever had about who I am. And I've been engaged in that process. Not successfully. I haven't done it every single time. I've had moments when I actually failed to demonstrate the grandest notion I've had about myself. And I look back on those moments and, and say to myself, what was I thinking? What was that all about? Why would I say something like that? Why would I respond that way to somebody else's incoming energy? What's going on here? But since my conversations with God, and then I'll end my half-hour answer. But since my conversations with God, I've learned to look at certain events in my life, especially unwelcome incoming events. Maybe I'm having a little spat with my spouse. Now, I know the two of you can't understand that because you never have any spats.
Oh, no.
But maybe I'm having a little, unwelcome spat, little disagreement with my spouse. I've learned to ask myself a powerful question. What does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? That recontextualizes completely what's going on. And that invites me to come from that recontextualization to understand, what's happening here is I'm being given an opportunity to serve the agenda of my soul. This is not an opportunity to be right. I don't need to be right every single time. Of course, it's a given that I am. We all know that. My wife understands that perfectly. But I don't have to prove it every single time. So maybe what I want to prove is not how right I always am, but the highest thought I ever had about myself. Kind, generous, compassionate, caring. I mean, truly caring, loving, forgiving. That's who I want to be. By golly, I'm going to get there before I leave this planet if it's the last thing I do.
Oh, that was great. So you had mentioned that you had your conversation with God at the age of 51. I'm curious because for me, there was periods of my life, if somebody even mentioned a book named Conversations with God, it would have repelled me far, far away. Just the thought of speaking to God, I was so shut off from. And I would just love your thoughts on, you had this conversation with God at the age of 51. Was there a reason you didn't have it before then? Are there certain requirements or, is there certain things that you think people need to have happened to them for them to be ready to communicate with God? Or can anybody have this conversation right now?
Well, my answer to the second question is no, there are no requirements.
Mhm.
Nothing in particular, in my understanding, nothing in particular must happen or has to happen in order for us to have a conversation with God. My answer to your first question, why didn't I have my conversation before the age of 51 is really quite simple. I simply never tried. Maybe it never occurred to me that such an experience could be had, that could occur in my life. I don't know. I guess I always thought that God talked to people like the Pope, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the chief ulama, or the head rabbi. But God wouldn't talk to me or to the first baseman for the New York Yankees. God doesn't talk to ordinary, everyday people. So, you know what's interesting, Kyle? Most people who believe in God, and that's, by the way, 8 out of 10 people, surveys have shown that 8 out of 10 people believe in some kind of higher power. And most people who believe in some kind of higher power believe that God has communicated directly to human beings. If you ask the average God believer, do you believe that God spoke to Moses? Most would say, yeah, I think that he received it, information directly from God. We call that information the 10 Commandments. Thank you very much. Do you think that God spoke directly to Jesus? Most Christians would say, oh, no question about it, of course. Did God communicate directly to Muhammad? Bless his holy name. Most Muslims would say, no doubt about it. No, so we don't disbelieve that God speaks directly to human beings. We believe that God does. Most people don't believe that God would talk to ordinary folks like you and me. Now, I know that God would talk to me, and now whether God would talk to Kyle, that's another matter.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
But I thank you for laughing at my little bit of humor, because in fact, God talks to all of us all the time. And that's the point that God wanted to make. God said, to me, if you actually turn this into a book, because I didn't try to write a book. I didn't have my experience, because I sat down one day and said, I think I'm going to write a book one day, called Conversations with God. That's not how it happened. Out of desperation, I had my own conversation with God. But in the conversation, God made it very clear to me, Neale, if nothing else comes of this, if nothing else occurs except that, people everywhere suddenly realize we can talk to each other. I'm here for you, says God. I'm here for all of you. Yea, even the prodigal son, even the so-called sinners among you. I'm here for all of you. Just start understanding that fundamental truth about life, and then step into your interaction with me, your friendship with me, which is what caused me to write a book, actually titled Friendship with God. So, yeah, why I didn't do it before the age of 51? Just never occurred to me to try. And it took desperate measures, desperate incidents in my life for me to finally throw my hands up in the air and say, okay, God, what is it that I don't understand here? How does life work? Somebody tell me the rules. I was really shouting at God. And I was writing a very angry letter, just, as a way of getting my feelings out at night. Just writing this letter. Just tell me what's going on. If you've got answers, I'd sure as hell like to know what they are. And I heard this voice, soft, gentle voice in my mind saying, sweetheart, you are sure as hell about a lot of things, but wouldn't you rather be sure as heaven? And I'm thinking, okay, what's that supposed to mean? God said, okay, write this down. And gave me the answers to all the questions that I was asking in my angry tirade. And that produced other questions, which generated other answers, which produced other questions, which generated other answers. And before I knew it, I was involved in an ongoing dialogue with God. I'm only glad that I kept a record of it. But I never thought anyone else in the world would ever see it. Honestly, I didn't even share it with my spouse, with my brothers, with my family, with anyone. I felt it was a very personal, private, singular experience. Except I was told in the dialogue, about 1/4 of the way through what became, the first book, I was told, Neale, you will make of this one day a book. And it will be accessed by many people. And I thought to myself, that's not going to, no, nobody's going to publish a book because a guy claims to be talking to God. It's not going to happen. But in fact, I sent it to a publisher on a dare. Just daring the universe. Okay, show me. And I sent my handwritten notes, actually. I had them Xerox. and just sent bunches of handwritten notes to a publisher just to see what would happen. And the rest, as they say, is publishing history. I got a call, and this gentleman said, "We want to publish this book." I said, "You're kidding me. I didn't write it as a book." No, but he said, "No, but it would make it's a great work of fiction." And I said, back up here just a minute. This is not a work of fiction. And the guy says to me, "Are you trying to tell me you think this actually happened to you?" I said, "Yes, these are my handwritten notes from an actual experience." He said, "Well, okay, we'll put it out as a nonfiction book, but it's not going to find 500 readers because nobody's going to want a book because some guy out in Oregon claims to be talking to God. It's not going to happen. You're not going to find 500 readers." And he was totally right. He hit the nail on the head. The book didn't find 500 readers. Found 5 million. Not bragging, just saying. So I know I've told you this whole story before. You're kind to have heard it again for the 14th time. But that's what happened. But the most important message I received in conversations with God, Neale, I'm talking to everybody all the time. The only thing that's different is that you actually listened. And you actually took notes. Good for you.
I was watching this debate a couple days ago, and it was one atheist who, he's kind of a famous atheist who has studied philosophy and really smart guy. And they put him against 25 believers. And I actually wished that you could have been one of those believers because there were so many questions that when they talked about it, it was some things that you answer in your book. And I think the one big one that gets everybody questioning God is how can there be so much suffering in the world? And even more specifically, I think people can think about human suffering and how that might play a part in someone's growth. But what about just the suffering of children, of animals? So can you speak to, you've spoken a lot with God, and what does God say about that?
Well, God asks a rhetorical question. She says, "Yes, good question, Neale. How can there be so much suffering in the world?" And I say to God, well, you're creating it. You're the creator. And God says to me, "Well, you're creating it. You're the creator." And I say to God, "What are you trying to tell me?" And God said, "Neale, what I'm telling you is I have placed within every sentient being in the cosmos the ability to create your own individual and collective reality. And I will not interfere with that process because my desire and my intention is to experience you and to cause you to be the creator of your own reality. Therefore, you can be, in a manner of speaking, the God in your own little universe. And depending on how many lives you touch, you can be impactful in a larger way across the universe. But it's not my job, says God to me, to create events in the physical universe. It's your opportunity to do so. So if you want to ask, why are so many terrible things happening on Earth? You want to ask each other, why are you creating so many terrible things to be happening on Earth? And of course, I say, well, what about accidents? Terrible, terrible accidents. Incidents happen. Asteroids smash into planets and destroy, the surface of the planet where they land. Sun flares create challenges and difficulties on the planets that revolve around those particular suns. Incidents occur that are not necessarily and directly created by the sentient beings. who are affected by them. Nor do I create them. They are part of an ongoing chemical, physical, and physiological process of life itself. And they obey certain laws of life, like the law of gravity, to use a simple example, or the law of cosmic expansion. And not the least of those laws is the law of opposites. And they said to God, okay, you lost me. What's the law of opposites? And she said, in the absence of the opposite of what you are cannot be experienced. So let's pretend, we'll use a simple, simplistic example, that you'd like to experience yourself as being 6 feet tall. I said, that's interesting, you should bring that up, God, because I happen to be exactly 6 feet tall. And God said, how do you know that? I said, well, I measured myself. I said, but what if everything in the world was 6 feet tall? What if every blade of grass, every tree, every plant, every other person, every house, every car? What if everything in the universe was precisely 6 feet tall? How would you then be able to experience that you were 6 feet tall? You could know that you were, but you couldn't experience what it's like to be 6 feet tall because there'd be nothing that was not 6 feet tall. And the law of opposites says in the absence of what you are not, what you are is not. That is, it is not experienceable. Therefore, if you want to elevate the conversation a bit, if you want to see yourself as the light, if you actually say in your heart, I am the light, you will find yourself in many moments of your life in the space of what you would call the darkness. Because in the absence of the darkness, you cannot experience yourself as being the light. Therefore, raise not your fist to heaven and curse the darkness not, but be a light unto the darkness, that you might know who you really are. And that all those whose lives you touch might know who they really are as well. And that's the invitation that life extends to us in the moment we experience any kind of darkness, including a little spat with your beloved other. So the next time Kyle and Leah don't agree and they have a little spat, they each get to say, this is my opportunity to demonstrate that I am the light, and not to raise my fist to heaven and curse the darkness, but to be the light. And that doesn't mean to be right. It means to be love. What would perfect love do? So what I've learned to say to my wife, we have a little spat, but it only took me a few days to learn this, or no, a few weeks. But it took me a few months to learn this. But it took me 10 years to learn it. But I've learned to say to my wife, you know what, sweetheart? You could be right. But the truth is, it doesn't really matter. It's not important enough for us to have a disagreement about. It's truly not important enough for us to share negative energy over. I love you more than life itself. And all I want is for you to be happy. How can I serve you, darling? How can I serve? And my sweetheart will look at me in that moment sometimes and say to me, oh, that's why I married you. Not breaking my arm, patting myself on the back, but just trying to use a simple day-to-day example of what we're talking about here. I don't, as I said earlier, always rise to that level in my own experience. But I want 4 words engraved on my gravestone. He tried his best.
Yeah. Love that. So I just want to make sure that I'm doing this right as I move forward to develop my conversations with God even further. And so I just want to ask, is there any requirements for how you pray to God specifically? Do you need to be on your knees? Do you
No,
need
no, no, no. Of course, the answer is no before you even go any further with the question. Obviously not.
Okay, you can just say, "Hey God, how you
Yeah.
doing?"
Of course.
Okay.
Because it's not, hey, God, I saw the gesture like God's up there somewhere. God is not up there somewhere. God is right here within each one of us. So it's not calling God down or calling upon God. It's calling divinity forth. It's calling forth the divinity within you. And if you don't think that divinity resides within every single person, then you have not looked in Leah's face for a very long time.
Mhm.
But when you look into her eyes, you will see divinity. And then you'll be very clear that resides there. That which resides there resides here as well, even within you. And when we all embrace ourselves as individual expressions of the divine, on that day, life will change on the earth forever. It's really quite simple.
What has been, over all these conversations, the most surprising thing that you've heard from God that
There's
really,
no such thing as right and wrong.
mm,
God said to me, sweetheart, there's no such thing as right and wrong. I said, well, no, wait a minute. Come on. That violates everything I've ever been taught. How can there be no such thing as right and wrong? God said, well, let's use a simple example. Is it wrong to punch somebody in the stomach? I said, well, it feels like it's the wrong thing to do. I mean, I don't, it depends on the circumstance. God said, what did you just say? I said, well, that depends on the circumstance. I mean, if somebody's breaking into my house, trying to steal my baby out of the crib, I'm going to punch him in the stomach if that's all I can do to stop them. God said, see. So there's no such thing as right and wrong. There's only what works and what does not work, given what it is you are trying to do. I see. So the question is, do you understand in every moment of your life what you're trying to do? What are you trying to do? And the challenge on earth, Leah, that I've observed, both in my own life and in the lives of those around me, is that most people don't know what they're trying to do. I mean, we don't know what we're doing here. We don't really know what we're up to. We think it's about get the guy or get the girl or get the car or get the job or get the house or get the better car, or get the better job, get the better house, or get the better spouse, get the better spouse, get the better spouse, whatever it takes, to get the stuff that we need to be happy. And we're not totally selfish about it. We want to create happiness for other people, but as long as we have to follow the formula, and then we finally get the gray hair, we get the sickness, we get the hell out. But that's not the formula for life. That's not what we're doing here. So when God said to me, until you know what it is you're really doing here, of course, my father used to ask me that question from the time I was 14. What the hell do you think you're doing? So, and I started asking myself that question somewhere around 48. What in this hell am I doing? What do I think I'm doing? I mean, what do I really think I'm doing? Am I really just trying to get the house, get the car, get the better house, get the better car, what am I doing? And my observation has been that I didn't know what I was doing for the first 50 years of my life. And nor do most people that I observe. But when God said what you are intending to do when you come into the physical world is to demonstrate, to experience, to express your true identity. You came into the realm of the physical in order to experience your true identity as an individual expression of divinity. That's why you came here. And what's interesting is that when you devote your life to that particular objective, when that's what you wind up doing in the moments of your life, all the other stuff that you were stressing and straining for, the bigger house, the better car, the better whatever, fall in on you automatically, virtually without effort. And that's been my experience in my life. So the things that I worked so hard for the first 50 years, enough income to be secure, a wonderful life partner with whom I could be happy, in many, many other aspects of life that I thought I was needing to strive for, fell in on me automatically. I think I've told you this story before, but my wonderful wife actually asked me to marry her. I didn't even have to propose. I realized who she was in my life after knowing her for a week. I realized after 5 days of being close to her, I realized, oh my gosh, I've been looking for this person all my life. And then I was in my mind trying to juggle, how am I going to even say that to her without scaring her off, or maybe she'll say, well, I'm not ready for this right now, and you want too much. We're driving in the car, going to a date. It was only our second date. And she looked at me in the front seat of the car and she said, I think we should be married.
Wow.
And I looked at her and I said, you don't want to say that to me twice. She said, no, I'm serious. We like the same food. We like the same books. We like the same plays. We like the same music. We have the same philosophy. We have the same ideas about God. We're pretty good in that other room of the house. Why wouldn't we be married for the rest of our lives? And I just reached out my hand across the front seat, shook her hand, and said, done.
Mm.
We flew off to Vegas the next day, where you can get a marriage license with no waiting period. And we got a marriage license, went to a little marriage chapel that on every street corner in Las Vegas, there is one, and got married, came back as husband and wife. That was 17 blessed years ago. So my experience in life, not bragging, I'm just saying that my experience in life is when I began even trying to serve the agenda of the soul. Everything that I'd hoped for and wished for, financial security, the perfect person of my dreams lying next to me, all the events in my life that I was struggling and stressing for fell in on me automatically. So, and there was some guy walking the planet here a few thousand years ago who put it very directly. He said, don't go around asking, what are we to drink? What are we to eat? Wherewithal will we clothe ourselves? Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things will be added unto you. How much more explicit could you be than that? And then I said, well, yeah, but how does that work? I don't understand. Give me a formula by which it will work. And God said, he also gave you that formula. He said to you, quite specifically, it's so simple. Do unto others as you would have it done unto you. The golden rule. Now, in my conversations with God, I was given the platinum rule. I said, what's the platinum rule? God said, well, platinum is even more valuable than gold. here's the platinum rule. Do unto others as they would have it done unto them. Is it really that simple? I could, of course, be wrong about all of this. I don't think so.
So I have, after our last interview, I think like over a year ago, my good friend Titus, who's a part of a men's group I belong to, was really touched by the interview. And we share during this men's group every week. And I feel like almost every week he would say, been reading my books with Neale Donald Walsch, and he would just say how much it's affecting him positively. So I would love to have him come on real quick and just share if possible. Titus, are you there?
Yeah, in one of our meetings, we were talking one evening, and Kyle mentioned your books, and I got a couple of audio versions and listened to, I believe it was 4 or 5 of them, and the first 5, and it really helped me understand God. I come from a high demand religion background, and we're told who God is and how to think about God. So yeah, I feel privileged to be on this group here and speaking with you. The question, I guess, that keeps coming to me is, with all these voices and with being told how to think about God, or to think about God, how do I know when it is God actually speaking to me? Is a question that keeps coming to my mind. And I'm a very analytical person, so I try to figure everything out, and I'm starting to realize that in the spiritual spectrum, being too analytical is actually is not a plus.
Not
So,
always. It's not always a plus, and Titus, I had the same challenge in my life. I've been way too analytical in my life as well, and my mom said something to me when I was about 13 or 14 years old. She was reading my palm. She was doing some palm reading just for the fun of it, but she saw that I had a headline that went all the way across both of hands without interruption, and I had no heart line on my hands. And she used that as an opportunity to tell me, oh, based on the lines in your hand, you're completely in your head. You analyze every single thing. You look at everything analytically, but not emotionally. You go to your analysis first and your emotions second, if you go there at all. And she said, if you're not careful, you'll have a difficult time even loving anybody, truly loving them. And I did. For most of my adult life, I had a difficult time truly, openly loving everybody, because I was so analytical about every single thing, every single comment across the room, every single incident that occurred. I would analyze it and figure out how I was right and they were wrong, and we just aren't getting along. And I didn't realize until I had a string of broken relationships. Oh, the problem is not over there. The problem is over here. Oh, I see. So to give my answer to your question, how do I know? I can't tell you how you would know, but how do I know that the messages are actually coming from God? In my experience, God's messages are always joyful, peaceful, filled with joy, freedom, and love. And they're always for our highest good. They are never negative. They never contain any fear of any kind. They're always expansive and make me feel larger than who I have felt myself to be. So in fact, Titus, they're almost too good to be true. And sometimes my analytical mind, rejects them as, are just my imagination, or you're just telling yourself what you want to hear. And I said to God one day, how do I know this is not my imagination? just making this stuff all up because it's too good to be true. And God said, oh, sweetheart, sweetheart, if God can't be too good to be true, who can? Of course, I would use your imagination as well. Where do you suppose Mozart's music came from? Where do you suppose Michelangelo's art came from? Where did any great creation come from if it didn't start first in someone's imagination, imagining something that had never been until they put it there? So you know what? Don't dismiss the messages you're receiving because you think it's your imagination, because your imagination does not invalidate the message itself. So I don't know what your answer is because you have to ask God that question yourself. How do I know this message is coming directly from you? But when I asked God that question, she said, Neale, it's really simple. If you feel joy, freedom, and unconditional love, if you feel expanded beyond your wildest idea about who you are, that message is from me.
We have our good friend Stephen Klein who'd like to ask you a question, Neale.
I remember the one thing that really struck me is when you said, on this good earth, God's hands are attached to your arms. And I think I'm paraphrasing, but I think it says, so don't hit your children. And that just, and we spread that all over the place, just tried to get out to people. And in fact, my wife said, why don't you call Neale and ask him what he meant by that? So I called and I got, I guess, your secretary. And what was the funny part about it was I'm terrible with names. So I called him and said, hi, I just wanted to ask, what's his name? I called you God Boy. And your secretary cracked up so loud. It was just amazing. And then I got a call back about 2 days later. She goes, Neale's still laughing. Anyway, your name to me is God Boy. So I just like to thank you for what you've taught myself and so many people. I help run a recovery center for addiction, and I put all your books on their bookshelves because I didn't want to sit on my bookshelf, go to they. So everybody is, not everybody, but many people that have been in an addiction process here for recovery have read your books too. That's all I had to say. I just had to say, hi, God Boy.
Thank you very much. That's very sweet of you, and it's heartwarming, and I appreciate you sharing that experience with me. Thank you. I'm only grateful if some small thing I've done in my life has brought benefit to the lives of someone else.
Yeah. So there's one thing that you've said in both of our previous interviews that always sticks with me for a long period of time, and it has to do with forgiveness and that you'll never actually have to ask God for forgiveness. If you could touch on that.
Well, God said, Neale, do you believe that I am the highest power in the universe? And I said, yes, absolutely, I believe that. God said, then how in the world could you ever do anything that could hurt, damage, injure, frustrate, or anger me in any way? Any more than your 16-month-old child would hurt or anger you, or your 2-year-old son could anger you to the point where you felt that you had to somehow forgive them. When your 2-year-old child acts like a 2-year-old, you don't say to them, it's okay, son, Daddy forgives you. It's obviously not part of the equation. It's not what's going on. Because you realize your 2-year-old son can't hurt, damage, or injure, upset you in a way that you feel that forgiveness is necessary. It's the absence of forgiveness that creates divinity's expression. Understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master. And so God says, I understand why human beings behave the way they do. You're running around there acting like 2-year-olds. And nothing you do can hurt me or anger me or frustrate me or injure me in any way. But I deeply understand that at the level of evolution at which the largest number of you reside, your behavior is understandable, totally understandable. Therefore, continue the process of your evolution until one day you can demonstrate your true identity as an individual expression of me. But I have no need to forgive you any more than you have a need to forgive anyone that you deeply love. You simply understand, and understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master.
I love that so much.
So obviously, God can love us unconditionally, but while we're here on this planet, we might have some different obstacles that God doesn't have. So, how can we love unconditionally without enabling harmful behavior or maybe even harming ourselves?
By knowing that when we enable harmful behavior, we're not loving, we're hurting the other person. So I've come to a deep awareness. God said to me, Neale, loving another person does not mean enabling their injurious behavior. If you enable behavior that is damaging to you coming from another person, you're actually hurting them as well, because you're indicating to them that their behavior is acceptable to you, and that you will allow them to continue such behavior and do nothing about it. So unconditional love does not mean that you are unconditional with regard to how another person treats you. When they treat you in a way that is injurious or abusive to you, loving means saying to them, I'm sorry. I can't allow you to think that that behavior is acceptable to me, or frankly, probably to anyone. It's going to hurt you in your life if you continue such behavior. And I don't want you to be hurt. So I'm going to ask you and invite you to discontinue that behavior. And if you fail to discontinue the behavior, I will remove myself from my daily interactions with you. Because I cannot allow myself to encourage you to think that this particular behavior is appropriate or that it's okay. So I've learned to tell the difference between empowerment and enablement. There's a huge difference.
Well, Neale, this has been amazing. And I would just want to end by asking you, is there any way that we can serve you? We appreciate this wisdom so much.
Yeah, you can have me on your program every day for the next 14 years.
We'd love to. I mean,
Let's do it.
Sign me up. Yeah.
How you can really serve the world and everyone whose life you touch, including serving me, is to make a renewed commitment to be the change you wish to see in the world. Mahatma Gandhi invited all of us to do that, and I'm going to follow his invitation. So how can you serve me? By demonstrating the highest thought you ever had about who you are. And the next time that you get into any disagreement with anybody, to say the magic words. I may not agree with you, but I can understand how you could feel that way. And understanding replaces forgiveness. So I don't even need to forgive you, but I understand you, and here's what I invite you to consider in a gentle, soft, compassionate way. This is my point of view, and if you don't agree with me, that's totally okay. We can agree to disagree agreeably.
Thank you so much, Neale. And thank you, everyone, for being here. We love you all.
Yes, thank you. And we love you. And please come back with us again.
Every day for the
Every
next
day,
14
the next
years.
14. Bye,
Thank you, guys.
everybody.
Thank
We
you
love
so
you.
much, Neale. Thank you, everybody.